Everyone here and convene the meeting. We have in present, we have Paul, Christina, Richard Hayes, David Gaines, Fred Bushies for his board members. And I had a text here from Dean Gifford saying his signal is very weak and has not been able to get in yet. We do have a quorum and I'll call the meeting to order. The first item on the agenda is public content. This provides an opportunity for citizens to address the board of directors on any agenda items or other matters relating to NTMC. Each speaker will be given a total of 3 minutes to address any items. Anyone wishing to speak shall be courteous and cordial. With that in mind, are there any comments that were sent in advance of the meeting?
No, sir, there were not.
Is anyone present today?
No, sir, there is not.
Everybody via Zoom that has indicated they would appreciate the opportunity to address it.
No, sir.
With that, then we will move to the next item on the agenda, which is the consent agenda. We have the consideration approval of minutes of the June 22nd, 22 meeting and the September 21st, 2022 meeting. Are there any corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, they will stand approved as prepared. The second item on the agenda is the informational reports, monthly financial statements, fiscal year 2022 year to date, September. If our staff member going to address those financial statements in their packets. We have the Benton County Transportation Authority statement of net position. Nothing else on that item. Then we'll move to regular agenda item 3, presentation of general manager's monthly report.
Thank you, Vice Chair. We'll begin with the organizational chart. And that's in the slide presentation or slide deck here, and I also have it up here. We have 11 vacancies for bus operators, mechanic 1, 2, and 3 that is open, the road supervisor and office coordinator. We recently, HR recently filled the parts coordinator position, and they will start on October 31st. And we're continuing to look to fill the other positions. The mechanic position, we had the mechanic 1 resigned and took another job. Mechanic 2, he was elevated up to the fleet manager, so that opened up the positions. So we have a couple positions for in maintenance, but we're looking to try to get those filled as quickly as possible.
Thank you.
Any questions regarding that? If not, we can move on to Exhibit 3. Is the ridership by month for fiscal year for Connect service. See what our ridership is from the dark green, steadily increasing back up again. Here's on the next exhibit 5 is the waterfall, and that is ridership. Now is going to detail what our ridership is by route, and then each route is denoted down at the bottom.
So, Mr. Pearl, Vice Chair Hayes asked before the meeting started, what is this waterfall charge and all that sort of stuff. So I just want to explain for the benefit of the group. The value in a chart like this is to be able to see while the overall fixed route ridership is 219,000 as shown on the far right-hand side of the graph. This chart allows you to see how that ridership is comprised on every route that NTMC operates. Yeah, and that's divided into the UNT routes, and then the connect routes, and then the non-connect fixed routes. And so what you see here is, Discovery Park and Center Place on the far left-hand side are the two most utilized UNT routes for the month. Denton Connect Route 7 and Denton Connect Route 6 are the most utilized for the Connect service in the month. Route 3 ran 1,000 people, and then of course after the first of the year, 2, 4, and 5 on Connect are going to go away. And so as this organization and the DCTA board thinks about how it operates the bus service and where it invests and all those sorts of things, this graph is a good indicator of where that ridership is. And you'll see that change month over month as primarily around the UNT calendar when school is in session and so on and so forth. So just a little bit of commentary there on the purpose.
What we do to try to help, is it just going to be physically impossible to help the one on the right-hand side, or do you have a plan on how do we increase that ridership? How will we go about increasing that ridership?
So it's a great question. The board of directors of DCTA already determined or what they did in July was they made a policy decision around ridership on bus routes and what are the connect routes that will remain. And the policy decision derived an answer that said about 5.5 to 6 passengers per hour is the minimum viable product for a connect bus route. And so those that were above the line, 6 and 7, they remained, and then Route 3 remained because it's connected to the new social services support center out at Our Daily Bread on the loop towards the east side of town. And so one of the things we're going to talk about in this month's DCTA board meeting is the relationship between what we see around GO zone origin destination demand and fixed routes that are going to remain after the first of the year, which is one way potentially to help drive ridership on fixed route as the most cost-effective means to move a lot of people.
That makes sense.
Thank you.
And I think you went into that a little bit a month ago. Sometimes you have to refresh the memory of an old man.
That's totally fine. And plus the ideas and the concepts are ever evolving as we continue to work and sharpen our own messaging and thinking on things. So.
No other questions or comments. If we can move on to exhibit 6 is the next page. And that's the UNT ridership. Dark green is going to be our ridership for current year, and that'll steadily increasing, getting back to close to the 2019 service levels. On the next one is next page is the overtime, and our yellow graph line is going to be our current one, and that down at the bottom you'll see what the overtime percentages have been for the past couple of years. 2019 to 2020, 11.26, 2020 to 21, 9%, and then for 21 to 22, we're at 13.41%. And then the red line going across is the 10%, which is what our goal is. We're a little over this year on overtime.
So is this, like a couple of questions here. When it says 21, 22, is that really talking about fiscal year 2022 from September of 21 to September of 22?
Yes.
Okay. Could we go to a standard convention that just says we'll talk about fiscal year 22?
Sure.
Because everybody understands what that means. And then 13.41% of what? Like 13% of all of our hours are overtime hours, or 13% of our budget we're over budget, or what is the 13.41%?
So that we divided that out. So that is a percent of what our overtime is that is unscheduled. So our unscheduled overtime, and then we take vacations out of that. But that's our unscheduled overtime that we incur. And I can provide a further breakdown of that for the next board meeting in more detail.
So if you scheduled 100 hours of overtime and you ran 113 hours of overtime, we're at 13% overtime on this graph. Okay.
And can you give us a description of how do you get how does this unscheduled overtime come up? A sickness or something that wasn't planned? Is that the sort of thing it is?
A sickness, if a bus operator falls ill, whether they call in or it's unscheduled where they have to leave. There's
That's
just
what
a
I thought.
number of occurrences that happened that contribute to the unscheduled.
How much overtime do we schedule with regard to in terms of our budgeting? How does it relate to our overall labor budget versus our scheduled overtime budget?
I don't have those hours, but I can get Troy.
Yeah, we budget 10%. Anticipated.
Okay, got it.
Right now, most of the rosters, most of the bid rosters are running with scheduled overtime 3 to 5 hours.
Yeah.
Is it mainly driven by sickness or is it by operator vacancies? Overtime.
This is just by operator vacancies that we incur.
Like it stands to reason you would have less, if we had more people available, more drivers available to fill in when somebody calls in sick, we would have lower overtime.
Right. Yes. Yes. If we had a full complement of bus operators, the percentage would be significantly lower.
So Troy, ballpark, what is the labor budget for drivers in the year?
I can't speak to that right now.
Okay.
I can get that for you.
Yeah. I'm interested because it speaks to this point that if we don't have a full driver pool, it's costing us
Right.
a certain amount of dollars. Absolutely. In overtime.
Yep.
Okay.
I would also ask in relation to the budget question, is 10% a realistic number? Is it a number that you have goals to hit? I mean, I look, and I know you don't have data past June of 19, but even before COVID, well above 10% this year, well above 10%. It seems the only time we were below 10% was right in the middle of, right at the start of COVID. If we're budgeting based on a 10% number, is that a realistic way to budget?
And we can certainly review that and go off of past year's experience that we have right here and see if that is something that we need to adjust. It is an industry standard that we're going by. And we can certainly adjust that accordingly to our situation here.
Well, I imagine if it's due to driver shortages, you have salary savings to make up for it from a budget standpoint. So if that's the justification, I can see how that washes out.
And then within your packet, the ticket sales information is in there. If you have any questions regarding ticket sales.
We were trying to calculate what it costs us to collect our totals and ticket sales. The reason I asked was if we spend $1,000 to collect 4,000, that's pretty good. If we spend 4,000 and collect 4,000, it's like, why bother? So I just didn't know if they ever looked at what is the actual cost.
Yeah, Mr. Vice Chair, that would fall under the DCTA purview, I believe, and one of the things that is on our list is the evaluation of implementing cashless fare system. So what that looks like is, you load money on a tap card or some sort of a device in the bus that allows the person just to tap the card. And if they're a UNT student, they don't pay when they ride, so they just tap and say, yeah, I'm a UNT student. But if they tap because then they're a regular consumer, a regular rider, then maybe debited accordingly. Because we are asking ourselves the same question. Troy, you got something?
I do. The labor for the operators is $2 million. That's right at just short of 100,000 hours.
That's the overall budget, $1 million. Okay. So if we're running 13% over, that's $130,000. Okay. Okay.
We'll move on to the driver's pay and benefit comparisons, and Cameron Springer will be discussing this.
Good morning, gentlemen. How are y'all? Can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So last month we went through and we did a wage analysis, and just to clear up a little bit, there was some information that had pulled over that was incorrect on the last slides that we reviewed last month. So with that being said, your first item 3A on slide 16, we are looking at just the base wage comparison between DART, NV Transit. We were able to come up with a little bit more information from DART. DART actually does pay their rail and bus operators the same wage. I know that that was a question. DART recently renegotiated their contract and they moved the smart bus operators just underneath all operators. So you'll see the wage comparison for those. And then, do you have any questions so far on that one? You can tell that we are right at a little bit lower than Trinity Metro's non-CDLs and CDLs. And then you can also see that we are quite a bit under DART. NV Transit, it looks like we are almost just equal to or a little bit higher. And then Beaumont, we are higher in pay and wages. We are still waiting on a tremendous amount of data from other transit agencies that we have requested, and we are still in the process of waiting.
Cameron, have you requested from Louisville ISD?
Yes, we have. They actually, let's see, I believe that we have, we don't have their wages as of right now, but we have requested, and I've also requested their benefit information. We have, and that was last month, and I followed up. on FOIA requests and things like that. But some of the information that we do have, we have crumbs, but they pay per 100 minutes. So we didn't break that one down but we did ask for Louisville's pay.
Okay.
I noticed this giant jump in MV. Is there a reason why MV had this giant jump in the last couple of months, looks like? Or am I misreading that?
So on the last board meeting, we did not include NV Transit due to the fact that we did not have their information yet. So we did put NV Transit within our pay scales for this board meeting.
Or I think what he's asking is what did MV Transit did? So maybe back up, Cameron, and just to clarify that what this chart is showing is this is wage by agency, by driver type, depending on the amount of service that the individual has. So I think what you're seeing, Mr. Bushy, is there's a big jump if you're a driver with MV Transit with 72 months of service. And then when you get to your 73rd month, this graph is saying there's a big increase.
Yeah.
So
Yes, it is a huge.
what's the reason for that?
After working 6 years, that's the pay rate that they have established for that.
So that just means they keep their people a long time.
Yeah,
That's-
they do. Yes, that's basically what it means. Sorry.
And
No, that's
MV
okay.
Transit is if I'm understanding correctly, it's a privately owned passenger transportation contracting services firm. So it's like a competitor or
Yes.
peer to HTG. Okay. got it.
Yes, it is. Do you have any questions regarding this slide? Any additional questions?
Cameron, this is Paul. I have some comments. Thank you for the analysis. We've been after this for a long time and it feels like it's now starting to come together. So thank you for that. I think the framework of what we're trying to get to is the pieces are coming together. We've got different agencies, CDL, non-CDL, and then time and service. And that's what we're trying to compare. I wonder if you could take an iteration of this graph in a line graph form, perhaps,
Absolutely.
where
Absolutely.
you
We need that,
where you
yeah.
plot, and you've got, again, that the X and Y axes, I think are correct, but if you made the DCTA line, you plot a DCTA line, and then you plot next to it an average, and then above each data point, you plot what's the high and low. I think it would be
Yes.
easier to understand with that where we fall. And if you're going to do it that way, then you have to break it out. You'd have to have 4 line graphs. You have to have 1 CDL, non-CDL, and then you have to have 2 with pay and benefits and without pay and with benefits and without benefits. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. We can do that.
And I would love to see that as soon as possible, because this is a conversation that we need to be paying attention to this right now with the gaps that our general manager has pointed to on our org chart with regard to vacancies. So thank you.
So if we have 53 drivers, right, we paid everybody $1 more an hour, 2,080 hours a month. 53 drivers. That would cost us, I was trying to figure out, for every $1 increase in wages, what does that translate to us? One of my calculations is about $110,000 annually. Everybody across the board, $1 an hour raise. So the question in my mind was, where do we have to be? And if we're spending $130,000 on overtime, where do we need to go to be more competitive?
That's exactly the kind of analysis we need to be able to do, which is why we've been asking for this, and glad to see it coming together. The other part of this is, how many drivers do we need to make the service? Back to the red, yellow, green stoplight chart of how are we doing on our extra board and all that sort of stuff. And then how does that change with the service change that we're gonna undertake on January 1. So there's a few different variables in that question that we still need to nail down, but that's exactly where we need to go.
I would also include in the analysis, I think everything you're saying is right, and I probably like the line graph and having an average. But I'd be curious, is Dart the number one, is Dart the number one competitor and they need to be considered separately from everyone else? Or are these equal competitors in the labor market? I don't know the answer to that. I can see how Dart would be a significant competitor, and they are obviously, their wages are significantly higher than everyone else's. So is that, even if you go up and you hit the average, Dart's still a couple dollars more, is that going to move the needle? I'd be curious of that analysis as you're looking at who the competitors really are.
Sure. We are trying to not just look at other transit systems. We're trying to look at where the bus operators are going. Is it FedEx? Is it Amazon? Is it other industries? Those are our competitors also. So we're trying to gain and gather information from them as well. So we have across the board enough information from within the community that we can say, this is where everybody else is at. This is where we stand. So it just isn't going to be with transit systems or school bus systems. We're trying to branch out and really get a good indicator for where we're at.
I think that's a fair point. Do we know what Dart's vacancies are right now with this salary structure they have? Are they experiencing the same issues?
Yes, they are. Yes, they're down a couple of hundred bus operators.
Do you have any idea what the reason is?
John?
So there's a lot of changes that happened to the CDL requirements. And so a lot of people medically could not pass the CDL. And then also the training requirements to get your CDL now is a whole lot more stringent. And so there's less people that are going into it. The other thing that to keep in mind is that this is not just here in this geographic area. This is nationwide. There's a shortage of CDL drivers throughout the country. And so, used to a transit agency would train employees. Now you've got to meet the standards, and there's about 200 and something different modules that have to be discussed, and it's a lot more stringent than it used to be. So any type of CDL, solid waste, if you're looking, City of Denton, solid waste department, what are you paying those drivers? What are you paying the school bus drivers? What are you paying the over-road truck drivers? All of those things need to be looked at, because really anybody that has a CDL could leave a job today and get a job in the morning, somebody else. And so your cement companies, the construction side of things, all of those things are really becoming more of a competitor than they used to be. In the past, it was normally school bus and transit, because people kind of stuck to the same industries. Now it's a lot different. And some of the areas across the state, like in McMiddle, Odessa, they have a huge challenge trying to compete with the oil field and all of the fracking that's going on in all those drivers. And so over there, the wages are in the 30s per hour. So it's a huge challenge. So, but it's not just here for this geographic area, it's a nationwide issue.
And is it just wages or is it wages plus benefits? In other words, do you have any feeling for which is really more important as far as keeping people concerned?
I think people are looking at benefits as part of the package, but I think a lot of it goes, to money. I mean, I think they're looking at it, people's philosophies have kind of changed. Healthcare is important. Retirement is important. But, a lot of times you'll have a CDL driver that'll leave one job and go to another job for 75 cents, $1 an hour more, because that's more disposable income for them. And so, but it's a huge challenge throughout the country.
The latest mechanic that left for $3 or $4 more per hour. benefit side of it necessarily. But what am I doing within my pocketbook?
Where do most people obtain their CDL training?
Through community colleges now, American Truck Driving School. There's not really quote CDL for bus operators. And so most drivers get, their CDL through some type of truck driving school or whatever the case is. Transit systems and we're having to get approved by the DOT to actually administer the training and all of that. And it's a lot of training. So the cost to replace an employee that you lose is substantial once you invest all this money in training, because once they get trained with their CDL, they can test out and get their CDL, and then they have the opportunity to go find the next job that pays more. And so I think that's something that we've got to be creative in how we put together our packages. Like MV, 7 years, you make the highest dollar. Well, the reason for that is so that you get, your goal is to keep them there for 7 years to where they get to that highest rate. It's just the question, the revolving door is the years 1 through 3 normally. And so that's one of the things. So the quicker that you can get somebody to full pay and the more money that you can, put in the package, it just makes more sense to them, I guess.
Are there any local community colleges that offer that training?
Not here. No, sir. I would assume that most of it is going to like the American Truck Driving Schools and technical schools. But that may be something that we need to, try to work with the community college here to see if we can get
How
some.
long a program is that normally?
It's about, is it 4?
I know when I went to get my CDL, it was about 4 weeks, about a month long.
So the one that he's at is a month long. My dad actually is one of the certified testers in the state for CDLs. And so the course that they have is 12 weeks long. And it's about $6,000-ish to get that done. Some transit systems in different parts of the state are working with either the American Truck Driving School or some of the community colleges that have the training, where they're actually paying for their employees to go through the training because they don't have the qualified staff on board to meet the DOT standards. And so it's a huge challenge right now. And the law just changed, was it February of 2022? So it's February of 2022 where it got more stringent. So.
Well, and there's just been a revision in the community college system here, as you well know, because Dallas Community College is now not individual, it is the whole thing. And it would seem to me that that'd be a logical place to go to try to get it taken in at the root right now. Because you could then do it anywhere and it's going to be the same kind of instruction and the same kind of features you may have actually doing.
All right. Well, I think that's something that, some of the benefits of transit is that, you're in town, you're going to be home at night, you're not an over the road, driver, so you're not going to have to spend time away. You're not out in, rough areas, for the environment and things like that. And so, that was one of the things that we really promoted when we were in the Midland, Odessa area, is to say, you're not out in the dirt and the heat and all that kind of stuff. You're in an air-conditioned vehicle, and so we got to be creative in how we put the whole package together to make sense. Attract people and retain them. Because it's not just attracting them, it's retaining them. If you look at the cost, of hiring an employee, you're $6,000 to $8,000 just for the initial training side of things. And then you get them on insurance and everything else. And then if they leave, that's a sunk cost that you don't get back. And so you want to make sure that if you bring them in, you're retaining them. So.
So the next slide, what we've done is we've broken down the wage analysis with the benefit premiums. Again, we are still waiting on a lot of information when it comes to benefits that we have requested. So what we have done is we have broken down, and we base this off of the average. So with our benefits package, NTMC non-CDL, and per the steps that we have, it's broken down. We want to say, we're going to say roughly 25 to 30% of an increase compared to just your regular wage. So if you add benefits into it, you have a 25 to 30% increase based on the steps that they're at during the progression stages. For CDL, you're looking at a 24 to 28% increase. Trinity Metro's CDL, you're looking at a 13 to 16% increase for total base compensation. Their non-CDLs, as they come in, it's 13 to 17% of an increase. DART is a 12 to 15% increase with their benefit package. Denton ISD is 6 to 7%. And then MV Transit, you are also looking at a 20 to 28% increase with the benefits put in with their compensation.
And so when you say an increase, when you consider benefits, you're talking about premiums that the company pays on the employee's behalf?
Yes, sir.
Okay. But do we know, so that's one side of the benefits equation. The other side is, what do they get? You know, what are their co-pays? What's their deductibles? All that sort of thing.
We do have that information. I do have their plans.
Okay.
And we can maybe possibly look at that off, maybe an offline communication between everybody. But we do have what they pay per pay period.
Okay.
In TMC, we cover 80% of dental, vision, medical. DART, they cover 81%. MV Transit covers 80%. Denton ISD, they only cover $250 of the medical premiums. That's it. And Beaumont, we're still waiting again on their information. But I have, back to your question, Paul, about Louisville. Louisville is contracted out. And so it takes a little bit longer to get their information.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to see that in a tabular format where you've got, here's the agencies, and then here's what they pay for dental, vision, and medical, just so we can get a general idea. Because what you just said is basically us and DART are paying the same in terms of the payout on the.
Correct.
So I'm just taking that as an example. Us and DART are paying the same in terms of a payout on medical, but DART's raw wage is higher. So if all things are equal.
Well, understand when it comes to benefit premiums and premiums that employees and employers pay, it is also based on number of employees and loss ratio and things like that. So those are all things that are taken into consideration when any company does a, renews their insurance or anything else like that. But I think it would be very beneficial. Employers usually do a total compensation analysis every 2 to 3 years. NTMC was created in June of 2018. So it's about time that maybe NTMC does look at a wage, compensation analysis. I think that would be good for not just our company, but, compare us to the industry and where we're at.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions regarding the wage analysis or wage and benefits?
I suppose I have a question. This might be for Paul. When we, so obviously, a good start of information. I like where we're headed with information. What is this board's role in that moving forward? You said you're gonna, sounds like you're gonna have discussions with the DCTA board. Is this a mid-year budget? What are the next steps for this board as we receive this information?
It's a good question. So the DCTA board has directed staff to perform an analysis like the one that Cameron is talking about at some point earlier in the year rather than later in fiscal 23. And so we're working with our human resources staff right now to scope that out. It sounds like from this conversation, we ought to ensure that our human resources staff, the NTMC and human resources staff are working together so the NTMC human resources staff can be working on the driver's side of the operator and all the support staff that show up in the NTMC organization. They can be working on that while we're working on the rest. So that should be the approach. And then in terms of how that plays into, okay, well, what do we do with the information? In our work plan for 23 for DCTA, we'd like to be able to line the findings of this study up with the beginning of our budget cycle, which starts in, the June budget workshop is the first time the boards will see a proposed budget for the next fiscal year. That feels like the best opportunity to really bring that forward substantively. However, I've instructed our staff that, these are smaller dialogues all along the way up to the point that we get to the public forum and say, okay, this is what we're proposing, just as you workshop this sort of thing. So the message is not start in May. The message is that start now and begin building the research and the analysis and the conversation.
Just a question. And this comes from a totally inexperienced person, okay? This is one of the more complicated things I've ever seen, trying to figure out what it is they are thinking for how we are playing. Is this consistent with the rest of the industry and so on and so forth? That you having to go through this kind of detail to come up with something that everybody thinks is fair, or is it a competitive thing? I know that sounds like a crazy question, but this is an incredible amount of work that's having to go into helping people help themselves.
Don, you want to take a look to crack that?
I think a lot of your transit systems are unionized. And so a lot of the unions represent a lot of the employees across the nation. And so I think all of them talk and kind of keep each other informed of where everybody's at. I think some of the legislation that has happened, employees are hearing about, lots of dollars coming to transit and things like that. And so I think that, when they hear that, it transpires or transposes into, oh, we should get some of that. And, and they're frontline workers. And so they are putting themselves, during COVID, a lot of drivers put themselves at risk of catching COVID and things like that to make sure they were still moving people. And so I think that overall, it's a situation where you've got to kind of look at the competitive market. You look at what, systems in your area are paying, and then you come up with something that, is a competitive, package. But then also, I think you got to create the environment within the organization that you want to retain people, they're part of the team, and I think those are some ancillary things that you can do to where you may not be able to be competitive on the wage and benefit side, but you're more competitive on the work life, family life, free time side, to where you can create some creative schedules, you can do some things that makes sense for certain type of operators that want to have more family time and things like that. And so I think it's a mix of variables that you got to pull together to kind of create that whole package. I don't know, Paul, if you want to add to that, or Maurice, but I think it's really, that's something that we've got to do. And I think there's been a shift in the last, really since 2019 in public transportation and CDL drivers. Some of these new rules came into play and all that stuff. And with all of that, you know, some CDL drivers were, you know, their jobs were shut down because of COVID. And they have found different types of employment. So they may hold a CDL, but they don't plan to go back to the CDL, you know, job market. They're going to stay in the job market that they're in. And so I think that we've got to be creative in how we recruit people. We got to be creative in the packages that we put together, and then we got to be creative in the overall, you know, culture that we develop and how we take care of our employees. So,
Now, another dumb, this is really a dumb question. How do you be creative? In other words, I guess what I don't understand is you apparently have all the information you need most of the time to see what is going to be competitive and what might be successful. Is that a false assumption on my part, or is that basically a simplification of what you just said?
well, you got to be careful not to do a knee-jerk reaction. You know, a lot of people have been raising wages, but how do you sustain that long term? With, you know, right now in a lot of communities, sales taxes up and things like that. But what happens if sales tax go down, and how do you, you know, strategically make sure that what you're putting together is sustainable? And I think that's part of the challenge that all transit systems are looking at, because they're funded, you know, mainly through grants. I mean, if you look at the amount of fare revenue you bring in, it's pretty minimal to the amount of what the service costs. And so, you know, fare box revenue kind of national average is, you know, 10%, maybe 9%. So of the operating cost of the overall system, that's how much you're bringing in from fare revenue. If you're exceeding that number, then you're doing really well on bringing in fare revenue. The question is, you're supported by sales tax, you're supported by grants. And so if there's cuts at those levels, then that means the first thing you have to do is cut service if you're paid too high. And so strategically, you got to look at that whole thing.
It's a really complex
I was going to say
policy conversation. I think we can take
so
up,
much trouble.
I think you and I can take this up offline. I think all the comments that John's made are helpful. And, you know, at the end of the day, what we need to be able to do is inform as DCTA staff, as NTMC staff, we need to be able to inform our boards of directors with the information needed to make good policy decisions. And what you're asking about are, where do we fall in the policy about how we recruit and retain and all that sort of thing.
We represent different places.
Correct.
If we understand it, then we can explain it to the
Correct.
places that we work for, or have been appointed by, or however you call it. And that would make it a lot easier for us to be able to make sure that PCTA and the organization gets what it needs.
And that's the reason we're having the conversation in the boardroom, is because this is information that we've requested to say, how do we understand what's happening? Thank you.
How many of our drivers or operators are part-time versus full-time?
We only have one part-time.
Is there any effort to do that? As I was sitting here thinking about who other CDL operators that I've been faced with, like a lot of teachers at schools have their CDL. You know, maybe it's a football coach or something, you know. I know a coach where he does Uber sometimes, and it's all time. So you can think about getting a teacher, it seems as you have to provide them any of these benefits because I already have it through the school system. So job sharing is what I was thinking about. If they could bid on slots for certain time periods to fill in, and that would be very a known factor to what Uber would do, and then you can pay them over hours if you have to pay them off the good idea.
Everything. There's some restrictions. There is on the CBA, there's some restrictions. And so, but I think we're limited on the number of people that we can put in positions. I'll have to go back and look at it to do that. But we can get that to you, so you know what that is. But no, I think that's a great idea to look at. Is there an opportunity, you know, to create, you know, different types of roles that could be part-time?
A lot of people don't work full time.
Correct.
We're missing part of the market. Like my wife, she retired. So what did you do today? She said. "Nothing." And I said, really? I left the house at 6 a.m. this morning, you know, 9 o'clock at night, you didn't know. She goes, yeah. She said, I've learned the less I do, the less I want to do. There you go.
Appreciate everybody's comments regarding that. It's very good discussion regarding the wage and the benefits. And move forward on the driver availability pool. We do have some restrictions as far as breaking that down in teams, just because teams has some restrictions with Excel. But we are looking at that to see what we can do to break that down to where it has a morning light shift or change depending on who is driving, and then in the afternoons. We're working on breaking those out by time, and hopefully we'll have something, but that is in Teams, it is live and ongoing.
Okay, and you're not able to generate a report, a snapshot report that says where we are, like today?
We can do that more robustly in Excel if that's the desire. We can do that, but in Teams it's instant access. Anybody has access to that.
Yeah.
To go in and look at where we're at. So
I'd like to understand. I'd like to be able to understand in this report, in this briefing, how many, we have 11 driver vacancies, we have 53 drivers available. What does that mean in terms of how much risk there is to the operation? And I put forward this idea about a red, yellow, green stoplight chart that says green, we have all the drivers we need and all the extras we need. Yellow, we've got drivers, but no extras. Red, we got not enough drivers, or something to that effect. Because I want to be able to understand and communicate at an executive level how much risk we have in the operation.
and we have that available in Teams to where you can go in and look at it on an hourly basis, by minute, whatever, whenever you want to take a look at that. In here, we can provide that as well, what we encounter on a daily basis.
Yeah. So if you have a snapshot report in this briefing that says here, in day 1 through day 30 of a given month, I was red, red, yellow, 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 now green, 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 whatever that. I'm not going to prescribe what the report looks like, but this body at a glance ought to be able to understand how much risk we have in the operation from the driver perspective.
And I think that's what all of us are really interested in. But the competition out there is going to be tough.
Can provide that. Appreciate that. Okay, driver recruitment status, and Cameron's back on.
Yeah. So this chart that you see in front of you, it shows you it shows you how many people have applied. So for example, we're going to take the CDL operators. So we had, in the month of September, we had 2 CDL operators who applied. We sourced from all different avenues over 86 CDL bus operators. We were able to, from that sourcing, 5 responded and said that they were not interested. 6 of them did respond saying that they were interested. We set up 4 interviews out of those 6. 2 of those interviews did not show up. 2 of those interviews showed up. And then one of those interviews, I'm sorry, 2 of those interviews turned out to be not qualified for the position. And then we had hired one of those CDL operators. So you can see based on the color coding of this chart, NTMC sources a lot of candidates. We have very few candidates that have been applying. Dispatchers, we do usually get a lot of those, and we have filled that position. But we do source. We source through all major aspects. We work with TWC. We work with the veterans here in Texas and in Denton County. So we try and find all avenues that we can to pull candidates in and invite them to apply. Candidates are not obligated to respond to you. And then some of your candidates are not showing up. So that's kind of what this recruitment chart shows. Some of the reasons and the main top 4 reasons, and I provided those top 4 reasons why candidates are not interested. A lot of them are saying the pay is too low. Their pay expectations are higher than what our budgeted positions allow us to bring them in for. They believe that either the company or the position is not a good fit for them, or they're just not interested at the time because they already have a job that they're comfortable in.
Cameron, what is the difference between on the CDL operators, the tall orange bar and then the yellow and gray bar that you sourced 85 some odd candidates who were invited to apply, and then only, am I to understand that only the yellow and the gray actually applied, or the gray says they weren't interested, so that would mean that
So the gray, some of applicants source that are not interested. So for example, say out of those 86 that I have sourced, only 5 of them returned any type of communication to us contacting them and saying, hey, we have this position up and we feel like you would be a good fit based on your qualifications, based on your resume. We would like to talk to you more about the position. Only those many people out of that 86, only 5 of them responded and said, I'm sorry, I'm not interested. Okay. Then if, for example, if you go to like the yellow bar, those applicants that we sourced, that we contacted, that we reached out to, 6 of those have returned and said, yes, I'm interested. What we find a lot, does that make sense?
It does. So how did you invite 85 people to apply? Did you post a job and you saw that 85 people read the posting, or
No.
85 people?
We actually go out and we reach out to them. For example, we do use TWC and Indeed a lot. Okay, that's 2 of our really major recruiting avenues that we have based on our budget. And we go out there, I source, I find, I view their resumes, and I physically have to email them or call them. So I am actually contacting them. They are making contact. We are making contact either via email, phone, or however we can to say, hey, we have this position and we would like to talk to you about it.
And I don't think I followed. How do you know what 85 people to call? Like, how do you know who those 85 candidates are?
So for example, you have a portal in TWC or into Indeed, for example. I'm going to use those 2.
And I apologize. I know what Indeed is, but I don't know what TWC is.
The Texas Workforce Commission. I'm sorry.
Got it. Okay.
I should have told you. So employers have a portal that they can go through and they can review every single resume.
Okay.
You type in your criteria and then you review their resumes and you reach out to them.
Okay. And this is over what period of time, these 85?
This is over a month.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. That's a lot of work.
I have a question. What role does prior criminal conviction history have on making someone ineligible to be a CDL driver?
So for that, the DOT does have certain stipulations and regulations based on, for example, if they have had a previous positive test result during either their previous employer, we don't consider them. There has been discussions about second chances, how we can go and how we can work with that. Maurice and I have had those conversations, but we do work with a background matrix that DCTA provided us when NTMC was established.
The reason I asked that question, I was recently at a North Texas Commission Legislative Summit, and the former head of the Texas Department of Corrections, and it's a more different name now, but what it was when I grew up. They said the number one, she's now started a nonprofit. She was the first woman to ever head TDC. And the number one thing they're recognizing for people who come out of prison is that they need a job. They have a job, they can pay for housing, they can pay for food. They can survive. But there are a lot of barriers. And then she went through a number of examples of people who had, apparently, serious conviction for living in prison. But really, they are a good fit for certain types of industries. So I had that thought.
Yeah.
That I'll track down the name of that nonprofit and try to make the connection on that.
And we've had, I know Maurice and I have had a couple talks about, what would qualify somebody for like a second chance. But as we serve the public, we have to make sure that we are not negligently hiring, because something could happen.
Yeah.
And we want to be very careful.
They needed some legislative cover, maybe.
Yeah.
Take that risk away from the lawyer.
Well, thank you for the work, Cameron. This is helpful to understand what the pipeline looks like. And so one last question. The orange bar minus the yellow bar minus the gray bar is those people who you contacted and did not reply to you. Is that correct?
No, the gray bar is the ones that have, well, yeah, you could say that, yes.
You made contact with the gray
Yes.
bar people and they said no. The others,
Yes.
you just weren't able to make contact.
Yes.
They didn't
Yeah.
return the call. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Other additional questions regarding that? If not, we'll move on to the wellness program. And Cameron, would you mind speaking to that as well? Where we're at? Now, we've had several meetings regarding the wellness program and where we're at, and then we have some other information in today's information packet about that as well.
So NTMC definitely has started our wellness program. We are actually really proud of it. We've had several meetings. We are looking forward to providing our employees with biometric screening. We are doing contests, and we've even started from not just a physical health wellness program, but we are also trying to expand that into, what is your financial health, and making sure that they are able to, and we will be tying in like our 401k programs with some of our wellness things when it comes to financial wellness. So NTMC is working very hard and diligent to ensure that we can provide our employees with a really wonderful wellness program.
Comments? Questions regarding the wellness program? And that concludes the general manager's report. Thank you, Ken.
I believe the next item on the agenda is the Denton County Transportation Authority North Texas Mobility Corporation. People comments here.
Good morning, everyone. I wanted to go over the KPIs with everybody. As you know, that this is kind of we're doing this new, this level of reporting. Normally, a lot of these statistics are based off of month periods. When you break them down into week periods, it changes the dynamics of how it presents it quite a bit. So we're refining this all the time, aren't we, Paul?
I'll provide some cover here or commentary, color commentary, cover and color commentary. We are an operations organization. We deliver service to people who need to get on moving conveyances to get where they want to go. Right now, I have to look in a whole bunch of different places in order to understand what's happening with every one of our modes of service. And all those modes of service report on different time frequencies. Sometimes it's daily, sometimes it's monthly, sometimes it's weekly, all that sort of thing. And so as an organization, a DCTA organization, we are marching towards the day where there will be, in that monitor you see in there, a rolling screen of safety and service and ridership metrics for every one of our modes, so that it's front and center to everybody's attention all the time, what we do for a living. And so recognize that this effort is significant and an evolution of where we've been in the past. However, it's necessary in order for us to make sure that we're delivering the kind of service we need to deliver. And now that our DCTA board has made the decision that bus operations will be a part of our ongoing services that we provide, we have to bring the bus operation up to that same level of reporting. So that's the reason for this. Now, different expectations on this kind of thing over different periods of time means that different organizations are at various levels of readiness in order to provide the information, but we are committed as a team to work together to get ourselves to tell the story that we need to tell on a daily basis. So that's the reason we're having this conversation.
Yeah, and to add to that, the collection of this information is a manual process in a lot of cases. So as we automate things and we'll get more just-in-time information, we'll just improve it. So in this 4-week KPI, we have passenger count. As you can see, we're averaging right at 50,000 passengers a week. And that is a combination of UNT and Denton Connect, all fixed route. Our passengers per hour is remaining pretty steady in the 50 passenger range per hour. Most of that, the bulk of that is, of course, UNT. In this next group, I want to point out something to everybody so they understand how this all relates to each other. In the one box, you have scheduled trips, and that's how many trips we have scheduled during that period. The next box is missed trips, and then the following one is delayed, which all this translates into the OTP. And if you look at the OTP, we have a 90% goal for OTP. And the reason that the other two tables are important is that if you just take the sum of the missed trips and delays for like week 18, September 18, that's about 200. That's about 10% of the trips that we made that week were delayed or missed completely. And if we had captured that or mitigated that, then our OTP for that week would have been well within range of 90%. So that's how all these different things relate to each other. It tells the story of how it's impacting OTP, the missed trips, the delays. Make sense?
OTP.
It's on-time performance, sir.
Okay. Can I just ask a general question?
Sure.
If you have delays that are based upon crazy weather, every once in a while we get here, obviously, is that factored into this so that it is something that there's no way you could have prevented it being a problem?
No, it's not.
It's not.
No, this, we go through this data, we clean out the traffic mitigation issues and stuff like that. So this has to do with either an equipment issue or an operator issue or a combination.
So you're taking out the whole thing.
Yeah.
From the outside.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and the reason we want to do this is so we can identify what's the root cause of missing an on-time form. Yeah. We can't control it.
Any questions on the fixed route portion of it?
What's the definition of a delayed start?
Beyond 5 minutes. What's important here is to realize that individuals, they're relying on our system to get them to work or to get them to school or whatever. And why that's important is because a lot of them are on fixed schedules. They don't have flexibility in their schedule. So we need to get them there when they're supposed to be there with all, as best we can. So obviously there's always issues, environmental type issues like weather that will cause issues. But
Troy, a missed trip is one bus missing
go.
one loop on a bus route.
delays 5 minutes more, and then this trip's, it just did not pull out, bus did not pull out.
And that could be for a number of different reasons.
Correct. But for the most part, it's mostly operational type issue. But it's equipment or personnel. In this case.
Is it, okay, I want to ask you another crazy question. Is it because of the age of the machines that cause it to be worse? Is it something associated with the ability of the drivers to be able to read where it was supposed to be at the time?
Yes and yes.
To me, either one's what you said. And do you separate it so you can tell which one seems to be?
We can.
I mean,
Yes.
does it make sense to, I mean, does it make sense to, so that you really realize whether it's a driver issue or something else that may have caused it, like, the buses were too old, or whatever, transportation was too old or broken or whatever?
If it's an identified operation issue, then we report that back to HTG. And we identify it, we have an issue tracker that we put these items into, and for them to respond and investigate.
That's great.
It's an ongoing effort.
Yeah.
My staff spends a lot of time just coming through all these events. So, anything else on fixed route? All right, next slide. This is our demand response. As you can see, the ridership is somewhere around 450 to 500 range consistently. That's through all of our cities. That's Denton, Louisville, Highland Village, and Frisco. It's pretty consistent. We have this, most of this is subscriber type activities. These are the same individuals. These are people that are needing to go to the doctors or whatever, medical trips and also for work. So we have a pretty consistent flow through there. What the variables that we're looking for here are the missed trips again and the denied trips. And denied trips are when someone says that they want to go to a certain place at 10 o'clock and we don't have the capacity to be able to do that because the bus is already full and the trip gets denied at that point. And it's important to stress here that we prioritize ADA trips over non-ADA trips. So the OTP has been good for the most part, except for in Louisville. Any questions on the?
You have a feeling for why Louisville is kind of problem with the traffic issue, or is it?
It's a combination of things. Yeah, combination of traffic, scheduling.
Okay.
Because you have to remember, this is a different class of client. They're boarding and alighting time sometimes can be different than the typical ambulatory passenger. And if the schedule's stacked not right, then you end up just getting 5 minutes later type deal. So there's a lot of variables there. Any questions? Unanimous votes.
Can I ask one other question?
Yes, sir.
One of the issues that we have in our town is we don't have enough people doing what we could be doing, that's fighting with us. Okay. And so is that reflected in any way? In other words, deny trip or any of this data, if you only have 5 buses running in one city, you have 200 running in another city, then it's difficult to compare the apples and oranges between them, right? Or is it not? Or would you just know by looking at this that, yeah, that was probably this or that was probably that? And that the reason for asking it is one of the things I'm trying to do in Highland Village is to get people to use it. And one of the biggest issues we have is everybody's so busy taking their kids to school that they don't have time to use us. And so trying to figure out some way to make that less of a problem is one of the things that I'm trying to look at.
We add capacity, of course, it's a reactive thing. We can't always project what the demand's gonna be, but it's a reactive thing. So as we go into the scheduling, like we just went through, we look at what our history is, historical data to determine what the capacity needs are, and that determines the amount of equipment that needs to service that area. And so, yes, we do, we review it every bid, just about. So it's every 3 times, 4 times a year, it depends on the bid process, so. Anything else?
On the 9 trips, is that based upon ADA or is that based
Those,
upon
those are non-ADA trips.
non-ADA?
Yes. Yeah, at this point, we have not had, knock on wood, any ADA.
Okay, I just wanted to verify.
Right, no. They get the priority, and so the non-ADA are the ones that do the denials. But ideally, we would be able to provide them, being that it's not medically related all of the time, that we would be able to accommodate them in another way through trip negotiation. So. All right, anything else? We're gonna be simplifying this too, so, but in your left column box, that is the VAMs, which is your vehicles available at maximum service for the system. The VOMs are the vehicles operated at maximum service. So what you're looking for is the delta of how many did you need and how many did you have left over? How many spares did you have? Which is indicated in the next column. Our spares should be up around 6, and we're teetering around the 2 to 3 range. A lot of that has to do, we are doing some rework with a particular piece of equipment to the manufacturer. But all these things should correct themselves. We're also going through the process of changing services, and that changes the demand for vehicles as well. So any questions on the vehicle piece of it?
What are the complaints normally about?
Bus,
Mr. Root?
it's a combination, sir, Mr. It could be the bus wasn't there, it could be they don't feel as though they were treated properly. There's just a lot of different complaints. So it's as simple as stop amenities. There's just a lot of different complaints. But for the most part, it is service related. Has to do with the bus being there on time or whatever. And we use to mitigate those or to quantify them. We use the AVL that we have to determine, was the bus actually late? And going back and looking at through our tracker, looking at the bus, where it was at what time to validate the complaint. So these are validated complaints. We can give you a small sampling if you want, next board meeting. It's really all over the place, so.
I mean, given the number of people we move on this across the UNT Connect service, that's a pretty low.
Yeah.
That's a good.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. It's very, very, very small.
Anything else for Mr. Riley? Thank you, Corey.
Yeah, I'll just say, we appreciate Maurice and the NTMC team working to pull these things together in a more real-time basis. We talked in the last board meeting about how we're about 3 weeks in arrears on reporting. You see the latest week we have is October 2nd. This is the week of October 24th. Our vision is to get to real-time reporting as NTMC evolves their organization to be able to provide that. That's the sort of effort we appreciate. But ultimately, we've got to be able to understand what's happening on the road as close to real time as possible. So that continues to be the goal.
Do you have any thoughts as to what it probably is, or could be, or might be? I know you haven't been with us that long, or you haven't been here that long, but do you have any feelings for what it shouldn't, or should be?
For what?
Ahead of when we're doing the next steps, in other words, why there's so many complaints, or why there, have any feeling for what determines these changing?
Well, I mean, from a CEO, DCTA CEO perspective, the things that I'm most concerned about are safety and service. And service comes into that. Complaints are part of it, but making sure we move the people who need to be moved when they get moved is, I think, the really important part of that. And then the overall ridership, which we're really well versed in. So as I'm looking and asking for Troy to do various iterations of this graph to tell the best executive level story possible in a short amount of time, it's looking at, missed trips, delayed starts, on-time performance, and what's the reason not hitting our goal. And the good news is, like we said before, our complaints and accidents are relatively low relative to the amount of service we have on the road. And so, anyway, that's where I'm focused. And then I have big questions about the fleet and our spare ratio and what we need to provide the service in the future and how do we source vans and all that, and buses and all those sorts of things, because supply chain issues are long lead times, all that sort of thing, but we'll take it a step at a time.
Well, and I guess that's the reason I asked the question. At the end of doing one of these, every month or every 2 months or something, this is what we've learned over the last 2 months, and this is what we recommend that we do to make a change.
Yeah. Right now, we're just learning how to have the conversation.
That makes sense.
We're learning how to have that conversation.
Yeah.
Before we can start throwing.
That's what.
That's right.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, the next item on the agenda is discuss and consider approval of the North Texas Mobility Corporation annual medical and dental benefits renewal for fiscal year 2023. Jimmy Rickman and Holmes Murphy. Adam.
So Jason will be presenting NTMC's benefits. Julie had to step off for a meeting. So Jason, when you're ready.
Hello, yes, can you all hear me? Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and I don't know why my video is not working, so I apologize for that, but Cameron, do I need to share my screen for the presentation? Okay. My name is Jason Newman. Actually, I am filling in for Julie Rickman. I'm a senior consultant here at Holmes Murphy. So going through your overall benefits package renewal findings for this year. Go on to the next slide. On the medical plan with United Healthcare, just a little recap of what happened last year. There was a loss ratio of about 93.2%. Loss ratio is what UHC paid out in claims versus what NTMC paid in premiums. Typically, carriers want, it says 85%, really, they would love it to be closer to the 80% range in order to, for you all to get a more favorable renewal. So 93.2 is a bit high. Medical and pharmacy trend were a combined 9.5%. That's the actual cost of receiving care, medical care and pharmacy medications. You all had a 26.6% increase in your claims from the prior period last year. You had $174,000, about $175,000 actually, of claims dollars that were pulled out of your overall claim. That's what, at your size, that's what UHC does. They will pool groups of about your size to underwrite them and create their renewals. So they pull out those large claimants and put you all into an overall pool. So last year you had about 175,000. You have much more this year, or actually in 2021. So we'll look at that in a second. Your overall claims experience is considered 38% credible. That's mainly because you don't have a whole lot of members on your plan, so that the overall claims experience is kind of unpredictable. We'll just sort of say that. And last year we had an initial increase of 29%, and we were able to negotiate it down to a 13% increase by moving over to the HMO charter network. Okay, you can move to the next slide. Okay, so this year's results, UHC's initial renewal was a 23% increase. Some of the reasons for that is you had a reduction in overall membership. Overall membership was down 27.4. That's total employees and dependents. This year, you saw the previous year, they pulled out 175,000 in large claims. This year, it was almost 630,000. So quite a bit higher on the large claimant numbers for this year, or for the 2021 year. The past 12 months, I should say. And then in the June 22 claims experience came back at a 938% loss ratio, causing the average of the loss ratio overall for the past 12 months to be 161%. So much higher claims in this past year than the previous year. And the number there you see there at the bottom for UHC is they expect to pay about $842,000 just on the ongoing large claimants that are on your in your population. And there's a newly diagnosed cancer claimant that has increased those numbers pretty significantly since the last reporting. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this is the overall claims reporting for the past 12 months. And so you can see especially that that number at the bottom where the loss ratio is 938%. Just to give you an overall number, the premium that NTMC paid over the course of these 12 months was about $970,000. And the claims, the total medical and pharmacy claims that UHC paid out was almost 1.6 million. So all this to say that claims wise, it's been a little bit of a rough past 12 months for your overall claims and for your high cost claimants. Okay, next slide. So given that your claims had run so poorly over the past 12 months, what was determined was probably best not to go out to market and see what results. We wouldn't expect much in terms of competitive bids from the marketplace. So what we decided to do instead was to look at some other strategies, specifically going to UHC and asking if they could bring down their renewal if NTMC decided not to go to market this year. So that was one strategy that we used. We looked at moving from a dual option plan that you have right now just over to a single plan. We'll talk more about that in a minute. And then we also decreased our overall broker commissions on your plan as well. So looking forward to 2024, we do know that marketing, we didn't do marketing this year, but we will do so next year. So we'll look at some alternative funding models. That will depend on the results of that. Would really depend again on how you're running claims wise, but that's something we'll address when we start that marketing process next year. Okay, next slide, please. These are some of the various results we saw from UHC when we implemented some of those strategies to reduce that initial renewal. So you see there at the top, the initial renewal was 23%, and they just looked at the same two options that you currently have. We looked at single options for both of your plans. We looked at restricting your pharmacy list, prescription drug list. So we looked at those, just looking at various things to reduce that overall initial renewal, and also reducing our commissions as well. Initially, we pulled it down by 2%, and then finally, we came down an additional percent. So we reduced our broker commission on this case for 3% this year. So all this just to try to get that 23% number down. Okay, next slide, please. So this was the initial renewal option, that 23% that we received. Go ahead to the next one, please. So this was the initial renewal that we received, just to kind of give you an idea of what it looked like. Okay, next slide. Or the next, yeah, okay. So, so we ultimately what was decided is to change from the dual option plan over to just a single option. The main issue for that is that we reduced the overall renewal, and you only had 4 people on the current HSA plan. So moving 4 people over, it was considered not enough of a disruption to avoid getting the additional savings by moving over to a single option plan. So here are some of the options that we looked at. And they all have different numbers here. So these are single options, HSA or your HMO plan. This is keeping the same plans that you currently have, but just keeping them as single options. Okay, next slide. These options, option 13 is in the green there. That would increase your out-of-pocket maximum, increase your pharmacy copays. That would also take you into a different pharmacy drug list. So it would be a more restrictive drug list. And then also the co-insurance would be increased. On the blue column there, option 4 would be an increase in your out-of-pocket maximum, as well as increase in the co-insurance. And then these are all HMO plans. We kind of pulled out your HSA for these options. That's what since most of your population is on that HMO plan, not the HSA, we sort of focused in on the HMO plan itself and pulled out that HSA. And so option 15 in brown there is just an increase to your out-of-pocket maximum. Next slide. And then option 16 here, that is ultimately the plan that made the most sense financially and with the least amount of, I'm sorry, did someone have a question? Okay. Option 16 in pink there is ultimately the option that we recommended. It had overall the least amount of change to the plan design and the most favorable overall cost. So the changes there would be an increase to your out-of-pocket maximum. You see goes up to $9,100 and $18,200 on the out-of-pocket max. And then there are some slight changes to your pharmacy copays. Tiers 2 and 3 would increase. I believe it's $5 each on those tiers. But the tier 1 would stay the same. It's that $10 copay on your pharmacy. And then option 17 there was sort of similar, increase to the out-of-pocket max, but on that one, it had that reduced or more restrictive drug list. And then when we looked at your overall utilization on the pharmacy side, that restricted drug list, we decided to not consider because it was going to cause quite a bit of disruption to your population on the current medications that they are receiving. So ultimately, we went with that plan 16, which I'll show you in a later slide, kind of a side by side of your current options with that next to it. So, okay, next slide, please. And then you can go ahead to the next one. These are the dual options that we looked at. Won't go into a lot of these. This is just some other options that we looked at along the way as we were considering the various ways to reduce your renewal. So these are dual option HSAs that we looked at. They had some reduction in cost, but there was an increase to the out-of-pocket maximum, and then that reduced more restrictive drug list as well. Okay, next slide. These options sort of similar. This would be HSA plans that we would pair with the HMO and a dual option if we kept it as a dual option. All of these changes ultimately would not have led to the kind of savings that we would have received if we had just by moving to a single option. Okay, next slide. Some more options here on the HSAs. These are just showing you what the different plans we looked at. Generally speaking, these were plans that had either or all of higher out-of-pocket maximums, higher deductibles, more restrictive pharmacy drug list. And then on some of these, there was there were options to add copays to your pharmacy on the HSA plan after you reach your deductible. So we just tried to turn over a lot of different rocks to see what made sense in order to mitigate some of the increase that we initially received. Okay, any questions before we move on to the recommendation? Oh, okay. You can jump up a couple of slides here. Oh, okay. So here is the recommended option. Like I mentioned, the option 16 is what it's called. It's an overall increase of 14.6%. That's a combination of employee and employer contributions. So as I mentioned earlier, the differences here would be that your out-of-pocket maximums, and these are the highlighted sections there, would increase, and you would have slight increases in your pharmacy copays. So tier 2, tier 3, which are currently $45 and a $95 copay, would jump to $50 and $100. So a $5 increase on those two tiers. So the tier 1, $10 copay, which would be mostly your generic drugs, that's going to stay the same. And this also includes no change to your current drug list. So that disruption that I was talking about earlier will not be in place here because you will have that same drug list that you currently have. Just to give you an overall sense of what the impact is, I think the next slide actually might be going on to vision. Can you jump to the next slide, please? Oh, I did have an overall look at the cost, though. I think it's in a later slide. So let's move on to the vision. The vision renewal was a rate pass this year from UHC, so no change to the premiums and no change to the plan designs at all. So no additional signatures right now are required to accept the vision renewal from UHC. And that's what our recommendation is. Next year, there is a bundled discount that is received on the medical plan by marketing or by bundling the vision with UHC. Next slide, please. On the dental, your current dental vendor is Dental Select. We had some steps to take here to get your initial increase down to. It was an increase of 19% initially. And you currently have two options, much like your medical plan. Ultimately, it was decided to move the dental plan over to a single option as well, and make some slight changes to your high plan. So we'll drop the low plan that you currently have and keep the high plan with some slight changes, which I'll go over in the next slide. But we do recommend next year to go ahead and market the dental, just because, you know, we will occasionally see the market on the dental to be pretty open, and we can get some better bids in perhaps, and we can also possibly bundle the dental like we do with your vision. We can bundle the dental with medical and get some additional savings on your medical renewal as well. Next slide. The high plan that we're going with for this year is, you'll see an option 1. So the initial renewal there you see was a 19% increase. That's that orange column. We looked at two different options. One of them would reduce your endodontics and your periodontics. That's basically treatment for gum disease and root canals. That option changes the copay to a 50%. It's currently 80%. So that brings you down to a 12.3% increase. We also looked at the option 2 there, which would be bumping up your annual deductible from 50 and 150 to 75 and 225. Ultimately, and that would be a 17.5% increase. So ultimately, it was decided to go with that option 1 there, the 12.3, and drop the low plan. Next slide, please. And the low plan, this is just what the initial renewal was on the low plan. We looked at the 19% you see there in the orange was the original renewal. We looked at maybe offering that as a single option, which would bump up the annual deductible and also be a 17.4% increase. So like I said, ultimately it was decided to go with that high plan, and then bump up the endodontics and periodontics, move that copay or a coinsurance from 80% to 50%. Okay, next slide, please. On your life and disability with Mutual of Omaha, you are currently under rate guarantee with them. So you approved the renewal last year, and the rate guarantee is actually good until the end of 2023. So nothing needed here to maintain that coverage, no changes to the plans, no changes to the rates. You do have some disability claims right now, but since you're under rate guarantee, nothing is impacted in terms of your the premium that you pay for those benefits. And then since you are up for rate guarantee, since your rate guarantee is up next year, we would recommend marketing this benefit as well next year. And next slide. We're wrapping up here. So this is the overall impact to your medical and dental on the employer cost. So moving to the single option HMO plan, dropping that HSA plan, with knowing that those 4 individuals who are currently on the HSA plan, assuming they move over to that HMO plan, it would mean that the overall annual cost increase for the employer is $131,841. On the dental plan, by dropping that low plan, having the people in that population move over to the revised high plan would be an overall annual increase, employer increase of about $3,800. Next slide, please. And then on the employee side, that making those medical changes, moving those folks over from the HSA to the HMO, The overall employee impact would be, or increase would be a little over $12,000. And on the dental side, it's about $1,300.
I have a question. On that
Yes, sir.
$12,000, is that spread? I notice we have like 82 members. We have 70 subscribers. So is that $12,000 number divided by 70? Just-
Yeah. Yep. Well, it would be divided by the number of people, since you cover the cost of the employee only. So that 12,000 really is only going to apply to people who cover their dependents. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. And then I think we've got one more slide. Okay, so these are the next steps. Approval and signatures to make the changes to the dental plan and then the United Healthcare medical pharmacy plan. Again, no signature, nothing needed to do for the life and disability. We'll have open enrollment, which will be mandatory for all employees. The dates are still to be determined, and then we'll have our team out there as well as some of the vendor partners out there to present, answer employee questions, that kind of thing. Any questions? Okay. Well, that's all I have. I don't know who I'm handing it off to, but that's what we have.
All right, we've been discussing the annual medical and dental benefit review. What we just heard is it doesn't require any board action.
I believe it does.
Yeah, I think it just requires approval for making the changes, and then there'll be some paperwork from UHC and from Dental Select just confirming the changes.
Okay. All right, then is there a motion to?
Mr. Vice Chair, I want to just ask a question for Mr. Pearl and Ms. Springer, just to confirm that the budget or the plans as presented are in the approved fiscal 2023 budget and within those limits.
Correct. Yes, they are.
Thank you.
Yes, NTMC budget is 17% over last year, so they should be right in line with what we have budgeted.
Okay, and you've compared the bottom line dollar amount from these plans to the bottom line dollar amount in the budget, given that increase.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Just confirming, I understand we anticipated 17% overage. They've talked about the same percentage overage, but I want to make sure that you've looked at the bottom line number from their proposal versus the bottom line number in the budget, and that both are the same, or the proposed is less than. Yes.
The proposal is less, yes.
Okay, thank you.
It's at 14.6%.
Okay. Got it. Thank you. Then I move to approve.
I have a motion to approve. Is there a second? Any other discussion? Then all those in favor of approving the annual medical and benefits renewal for fiscal year 2023, say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. Ayes have it, motion is adopted. Next item on the agenda, discuss and consider approval of the on-site health diagnostics in an amount not to exceed $1,000 to perform biometric screening for NTMC employees for fiscal year 2023. Jason also be doing that.
Pardon me?
On our next agenda item about approving the biometric screenings. It also says Holmes Murphy here, and I just wondered, is Jason Newman going to also be doing that?
Cameron, I don't have that.
Okay, so what the biometric screening is we are looking at performing, this is as part of our wellness program. we are looking at performing biometrics training for our employees. It'll consider, it's a glucose stick, it's your height, your weight, body mass index, just so they know where they are and address any issues that they may see going forward. It's really nice for them to know where they stand with their health. The on-site quest or the on-site diagnostics, they will do individual screenings. They will also, it goes billed to our insurance, and then NTMC will cover the cost for those who want to participate, and then who are not on our insurance plan. We have currently we have 11 people who are currently not enrolled in our healthcare plan, and I believe the price for that is going to be about $31 to $41, and it should not exceed the $1,000 that we have budgeted within our wellness program.
And this is an initiative that was brought up by the Wellness Committee, and we want to try to be a little bit more proactive and let our employees know where they're at health-wise. If there's something that comes back that might be something that is of concern, that they can get that addressed. So we're trying to be more proactive about this, and with the Wellness Committee initiating this initiative, it's a good progress and step in the right direction.
I'll ask a really dumb question. Why wouldn't you? That's
Take that as a motion. Is there a second?
Okay, I just wondered because it makes all sense in the world.
And this is a budgeted, it's a budgeted expense, right? It's a one-time $1,000 payment.
Up to $1,000. It is a one-time event, and it has been reviewed by legal, and we are. It's not to exceed $1,000.
And that 1,000 covers the entire. Good for you.
I'll second.
Correct. NTMC has a budget for the wellness program, and it should not exceed $1,000.
Got it.
All right, there's a motion, a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. 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 Any opposed say no. Ayes have it. Motion is adopted. Next item on the agenda is to discuss and consider approval of a contract renewal with Arc Point Labs. Amount not to exceed $6,000 for drug and alcohol testing effective January 1st, 2023. The presenter on that is Mr. Spell.
Yes, sir. We're applying to renew the contract. Basically, we had one change to make on the contract because it fell under DCTA. Now it will fall under NTMC. That is the only change to the contract. The price is the same price as last year. And this goes towards our drug and alcohol program that all operators are required to have, and that the company is required to present to NTD as far as different reportings.
And in the budget.
And in the budget.
I see how you say in the budget, I say move to approve.
Second by Mr. Gaines. Any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the contract renewal with Arc Point Labs?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed say no. Ayes have it. Motion is adopted. We will renew the contract with Arc Point. Next item is discuss and consider approval of one-time inflationary payment for North Texas Mobility Corporation employees. Pearl.
Thank you, Vice Chair Hayes. The DCTA board has approved a one-time $1,000 inflationary payment to NTMC, all NTMC employees, and that request is being brought to the NTMC board for their approval. Once we receive approval from the NTMC board, then that will be distributed to all NTMC employees. That is in the budget.
Yeah. Yeah, so it'll be paid for by the 2022, by FY 2022 funds. So I would move to approve one-time inflationary payment for NTMC employees in the amount of $1,000.
Second that. Okay, motion by Christina. Bush. It's made and seconded to approve the one-time inflationary payment for markets corporation employees. So that, if I take $1,000 and I about 2,080 hours, that's like 48 cents an hour. Increase, so as a percentage of true inflation, that's not very close. Steve thought it's like something that's better than nothing.
There's extensive discussion about this item at the two DCTA board meetings prior to its approval. Go back to our conversation earlier in the meeting about what is our policy around compensation and how we pay employees and all that sort of thing. And these things are all tied together. So this was the wish of the desire of the DCTA board at the recommendation of staff in the second iteration, and anticipate we'll be revisiting the entire question over the first half of this year.
Thank you. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. I just have a motion to stop. Next item on the agenda is presentation of the NTMC staff spotlight. Well,
Thank you, Vice Chair Hayes. I'd like to present to you Ms. Yolanda Harris. She is a mobility service representative. She came on to the company not that long ago, back in May. She represents the company very well. She is visually impaired, and with the software that NTMC has provided her, she is able to answer calls, send emails, and take care of the day-to-day operations within her department. She is definitely a great asset to this company.
thank you. Well, congratulations to Ms. Harris. I don't believe she is zoomed in with us this morning, but if Mr. Spell, you would share with her our congratulations to her and our appreciation for her excellent customer service.
Yes, sir, I will.
Vice Chair, I'd like to just underline that point. Our customer service representatives and how we engage with our customers is one of the most important things that we can be doing right now as an agency. And so appreciate Ms. Harris's contribution.
All right, the next item is we had on the agenda for an executive session, but there's no executive session items that we need to cover. So the next item then would be future board meetings, agenda items. Gives the opportunity for board members to request any future agenda items to be placed on our agenda. Or anything other than what we've already discussed today.
Mr. Vice Chair, I know that we already have a meeting on the calendar for November 30th. I think intended to be a combined November-December meeting. Is that correct? We're going to do two successive meetings.
From the last board meeting, that we were supposed to have a November 30th board meeting.
And then what is the December board meeting date?
We did not have a December board meeting date.
Okay. Thank you. The DCTA board has opted to combine the November and December board meetings into one board meeting on December the 1st. At your discretion, sir, that could be an option for this board. But my intent here is to figure out a way to cause the NTMC board meeting to occur after the DCTA December 1st board meeting. And so I'd like for us to consider that, moving the November 30th meeting from November 30th to perhaps the following Wednesday would be December the 7th. And then how do we can we set a calendar for all of our meetings in 2023 as we make sure that we maintain a fourth Thursday of the month cadence for DCTA? We've had to make adjustments over the course of this year for various reasons, but I want to get us into a rhythm where we know when we're meeting relative to the DCTA board so that staff and the secretary and others can get our agendas synchronized and prevent some of the challenges we've had this year. No. It's not even necessarily about those sorts of questions, just making sure that we're taking care of our business in a manner that gets sequential communication between the two bodies.
All right, so you said DCTA meets on the 30th?
DCTA meets on December the 1st. So would this board be willing to move its next meeting to December the 7th? And potentially could forego a November meeting unless our council has any exception to that.
I've got, I can zoom in on the 7th if possible.
But you don't have any problem with combining a November and December board meeting for NTMC? Okay.
The 7th was.
So works for my calendar. Okay, hopefully that meets our president's calendar.
Would there be any objection to in it? I know we used to start like 9. We start at 8:30. What time do we start?
It's always been 8 o'clock.
It's always 8 o'clock. Would it help anybody if we started at 8:30?
8:30 would help. Yeah, it would help. Yeah.
Okay, so I propose then December 7th at 8:30. You're okay. You're okay with that? Okay.
So we decided that's what we're gonna do.
Just a quick question. Are you wanting the NTMC board meetings to going forward be at 8:30?
I'm asking for December the 7th.
Just
and then we
for
can-
that one.
And one of our agenda items next meeting should be, what is our calendar for 2023? And what's the start time and all that.
Okay, thank you, sir.
So decided we're 8:30 on the
On the 7th.
7th.
Okay, I just got a text. And it says Gifford County, to schedule a legislative breakfast for December the 7th. And it
Is
says
that the
probably also want to attend now.
Okay, all right, I'll put that on the calendar. So good, yeah, what about the 6th or the 8th essentially?
Six works for me.
8:30.
Okay,
Yeah, might be city council. if you want them to.
December 6th.
Okay, I'll put it the 8th. 8 works, I mean.
I could propose the 8th to work.
I can make it.
You, Joe?
I got it.
All right.
There's no objection. then We'll meet December the 8th at 8:30 here. As our next regularly scheduled meeting.
Great. Thank you all for that. And then we can talk, let's have an agenda item for what's our rhythm schedule.
If staff maybe could present a proposed schedule sinking, following after the DC.
That'd be great. Okay, thank you for that.
All right. Anything else to come before the body? If not, there's no objection, and we will adjourn. There's no objection, the meeting will adjourn.